Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Cryptids and Monsters video. Alright, let's go ahead and let's do one last entry here for this go around. Then I'll give this series a brief rest and then I'll start working on another new series here. In fact, I'll probably start the aliens and UFOs one again since it's been a while since I've talked about some of those videos. So be on the lookout for that soon. But this entry, I'm going to go ahead, it's going to end things on a high note, mainly because it's once again talking about fairies. I realize that I do like talking about them. It's just a fascinating set of creatures that apparently roam throughout multiple parts of this world. And in this case, very similar to something that I just talked about at the beginning of this go-around of my Cryptids and Monsters series, the ones that I did on the brownies/boonies, which I'll include for the link for it below in case you haven't checked it out. You'll see some of the similarities for them. But yes, an interesting little set of creatures that apparently roam certain parts of the world, especially if you have some farmland or some kind of home that they can help out with. And it has to do with this. You're looking at them now. They go by several names. I'll just go by the most common one. I believe it said Ellyll. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Ellyll, but they're also known as the Ilion, or potentially the Twilight Tag, and then also known colloquially as Welsh fairies. So let's go ahead and let's talk about all the fascinating information associated with these very, very unique set of creatures. So what are these Ilion or Ellyll? Well, again, there's various names for them. There's even other names such as Welsh pygmies or also Welsh elves. They're essentially mythological creatures that you can find there, essentially just roaming about certain lands, certain trees as well. I was reading some information about especially one historic tree that had been around and was very domineering when it came to its landscape. But you also find them within farmlands, within homes, and then also within crevices of rocks as well. They are basically human-like creatures, but just shrunk down to the tiniest size, like probably barely reaching average person's knee, and that's even stretching it at most. But essentially that's what they look like. They're elves, and they have these unique, I guess, attributes to them that I'll talk about more here in a minute. But if you wanted to go find them, it's pretty hard to do so because they're very elusive. They live out of these groves, they live out of these valleys, again, those trees I was mentioning earlier, and then other things that maybe allow them to be even more hidden that we're just not aware of because of certain those magical attributes that I'll mention here in a minute. But again, just think of very small humans, and then they just happen to be about those areas, maybe Scotland and other areas, and then that's where you have these creatures. As far as those magical attributes that I was mentioning, first off on that, it seems like these creatures are more solitary. So even though they have these magical abilities, they tend to just stay to themselves. In other words, they're very individual creatures. You may find them with a pack of them together. That's where I believe they become known as the Ilion. But otherwise, you'll mostly find them individually roaming about on their own, almost like in nomadic nature. And if you do, they'll stay pretty much solitary because they'll try to stay out of sight. They rarely interact with humans, and they try to stay out of people's way. It kind of makes sense considering, again, how few examples there seems to be associated with these Ellyll. But on the few circumstances that they do come across humans, it's pretty much up to their choosing if they want to help people. So essentially they're almost like they're beneficial to people, but it pretty much is up to each individual fairy. If they decide they're going to help out someone, then they will. If they decide they're going to do nothing, then they're going to do nothing. There are a few occasions where apparently they are harmful to humans. I imagine along those lines, though, it's more of, let's say somebody is picking on them or just trying to destroy their area, trying to do something harmful to them in turn. And then that's when these Ellyll essentially turn on people. I don't think, though, that there's some that are just outright evil. Although somebody, if you know more information on this, then please, post it in the comments below, let us know. But otherwise, they seem to be more tipping towards helping out people whenever the right situation calls. In fact, in a minute, I'll go ahead and I'll talk about a well-known circumstance involving an Ellyll. But yes, as far as the magical abilities, is this. They can apparently do things like in terms of making crops grow, or they can make cattle get fat, or they can in turn almost like do a bunch of work that would normally take a lot of humans, a lot of effort, a lot of time, a lot of hours. But in their case, they can do things much quicker. If almost, even though they're minute in size, they can do things much quicker and more efficient. And of course, there's other things involving the magical attributes as far as potentially being invisible and being able to stay out of people's way and so on. So it's fascinating to read that information, but even then, the magical abilities seem limited in terms of the scope of what people know about what they can do. Some of it might be tied to this. Apparently, they're known to eat certain kinds of fungi, and these fungi have these attributes to them. It's almost known as fairy butter, and they especially are found in the roots of rotted trees. I don't know exactly if these are special things that they obtain from these trees and then in turn mix in other abilities to make them, I guess, be even more magical. But either way, though, they're known to eat that, and maybe also mushrooms, poisonous ones in fact, and then other toadstools as well. And that all apparently leads to helping them out with what they can do on the magical side. But they're also known to do this. They have these gloves that are made out of a flower called a foxglove flower, which you're looking at here. And it's a pretty unique looking flower. They use these, I don't know if they call them buds or gloves or some other type of leaves from these flowers, but they take them, they wrap them around them gloves, and then they use them as other type of potential sedatives or potential medicine as well. I don't know if that ties into also stuff along the lines of their magical abilities, but considering again the almost supernatural stance associated with these Ellyll, you would imagine that this stuff that they have wrapped around their gloves only adds to that effect. Like they're definitely being able to use something like that to help them when it comes to doing what they do best. And then as far as that tale that I was mentioning earlier, apparently it's this. There was this farmer in the mid-19th century named Rolly Pugh, and he was someone who his land, his area was devastated. Like there was a great loss associated with it. His crops wouldn't grow, his cattle would not get fat because of it, and so from it, essentially him and his wife Caddy were actually suffering for several years because of their very, very large misfortune. Somewhere along the way, though, in Ilion, maybe they were there the whole time, or maybe they happened to come across that location and they quickly surmised what was going on. They, in turn, got in touch with the guy Rolly, and then they offered to help him. They only had one condition, and that was as long as there was a candle left at night. Remember, these are solitary creatures, so they didn't want to do anything during the day. As long as a candle was left at night and they were left by themselves, then everything would be good. And then as one other caveat was the fire that was also left to keep them warm, as long as that was swept clean on a nightly basis, then the Ilion and then their comrades, the Ilion, I guess, a group of them, they would all get together and then make sure that the ill fortunes that befell this farmer and his wife would be fixed. And so the farmer and his wife agreed to it, and then the Ilion went to their things. Like, in other words, every single night for the next 3 years, in fact, can you imagine that? 3 years, they would be working there in the household, they would be working out in the farmland, using their attributes, using their magical abilities, and they were able to not only make the crops grow to very, very large sizes, but in turn made their cattle also grow to very large sizes. And obviously things turn around beautifully for Rolly Pugh and then his wife Caddy. But as it turns out, on one single night, that's where things just took an unfortunate turn. As it looks to happen, the wife Caddy always wanted to see the Ilion at work, and then as she did so, she came in probably as quiet as can be, trying to make sure that everything was a-okay in terms of her being hidden from complete sight. But when she saw the Ilion at work, it was almost like so jovial that it made her laugh in glee. And when that happened, the candle that was nearby, the one that was again illuminating the entire area, went out. And when that happened, it was pitch black. The Ilion obviously knew that someone was spying on them. And when that happened, they left. They left, and then they never ever returned. But the story still ends on a good note because everything was so good with the crops, everything was so good with the cattle that both the farmer and his wife were able to sustain themselves thereafter. And that's a good example of these Ellyll essentially doing the right thing and then doing very good things for the people that were there. But otherwise, again, they're pretty much just solitary creatures who happen to be helping out people, I'm guessing when the right circumstances call. But that's pretty much it. That's all the information that I could find as far as these very, very unique creatures, these Welsh fairies that are again roaming about certain parts of the world. So if anyone has any more info, maybe on a local level, anything else about a miss, then please post those comments below. And if you see the other videos, see how similar the circumstances are between the two of them, between the boonies and then also the Ellylls or Ilions, because of their very, very unique, almost like simpatico natures. But again, any more comments on this, post those comments below. All right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care. Bye.